Hello everyone, my name is Paul Third, and this week I'm going to tell you exactly why you should not bring the audiophile world into the mixing and mastering world. Reason number one, audiophiles love distortion. They may not like to describe it as distortion, they love to use tube amps, right? So you'll find that a lot of audiophiles like to use tube amps because what a tube amp will do is it'll add distortion, which they would like to call rich harmonics. It's rich harmonic saturation that, just rounds off everything, glues everything together, and makes everything sound smooth and natural. What are harmonics? They are distortion that are harmonically related to the fundamental. It's distortion, right? What happens when we add distortion over a mix? For example, if you stick an HG2 black box or an analog saturator or tape, for example, right, which is still a saturator, over a mix, what can happen? Your transients get shaved off. Your low end becomes a little bit more mushy. Things become a little bit more glued. When you add saturation to things, sometimes they can sound a little bit more musical and things just sound a little bit more gooey, blah-de-blah-de-blah, all these audiophile terms, right? When in reality, what you need is a clean linear system. And that's why I use it's right in front of me, my topping D93 discrete and A90 discrete. It measures impeccably clean. You'll struggle to find a cleaner system on the market. And what I love is many audiophiles, not all, because some audiophiles do like clean clinical sound, but most audiophiles that you'll find online that use tube amps and shit like that love to hate on topping because it's clinical, it's harsh, it's boring, it's sterile. All of the things that you need as a mix engineer. Because what do you need when you're mixing? You need to hear everything, because guess what? You can't mix what you can't hear. That saying will never not be true, and it'll never go away. You can't mix what you can't hear. Which means that if you are listening through a very coloured sound and you're adding, saturation to things and you're shaving off your transients and you're soothing your sibilants and stuff like that, what's going to happen is you're going to be listening to a coloured sound that's smoothing things off. And then when you listen to a cleaner system, all of a sudden, you're going to hear the transients that you missed. You're going to hear the sibilants that you missed. All of a sudden, your low end isn't going to be right. And you'll be like, whoa, my low end is just a little bit out of control. Whoa, what's going on there? Oh, this doesn't sound as rich. Like, what's going on? This mix doesn't sound the same. It sounds a little bit shitty. Why does it sound shitty? Because you've not mixed through a clean linear system. You need to hear the transients to be able to manage them. You need to be able to properly, cleanly hear your low end to be able to mix it correctly. You need a clean, clinical, boring system. That's why many people mix on Neumann speakers, because they're boring. They don't hype anything. That's what topping does beautifully well. For mixing engineers, I do genuinely believe there is nothing better in this world for mixing engineers than topping, because its job isn't to make things sound perfect. Its job is to give you the tools to be able to make it sound perfect. It's your job to hear the inaccuracies, the clicks, the pops, the inaccuracies in the low end, the dynamic range fluctuating, sibilants. You need to hear all of those things correctly to be able to fix them in the mix and to get them controlled. That's your job. So yeah, point number one, please, please, please do not mix into distortion. Honestly, if I see any fucking mix engineer or mastering engineer mixing through a tube amp or a tube DAC, you are dead to me. Dead. That's a bit brutal, eh? Nah, fuck it. Now, many audiophiles may argue, no, hold on here. Why are you giving us a hard time about mixing through like tube-based DAC amps and stuff when we're only trying to make things sound better? Is that not why you use all your fancy analog gear to add depth to things, to make them wider? Is that not what you all say about analog gear? That's what it does. Just passing through the stuff makes it sound better. That's what we're trying to do with our DAC amps. And to be honest, they do have a point there. If we, for example, put a mix through a certain form of, analog processing, just passing through the line amp can, change the phase slightly. It can change, it could be a left and right discrepancy, which adds more width. It could add, a form of, saturation, distortion, or whatever way, and somehow it manages to add some depth and stuff. It happens. That's why I use the acustica pre's every so often if I want to add a certain type of vibe or whatever. That's the non-linear beauty of analog gear. Now, what I found is that it's not only distortion. Some manufacturers like to embellish some of the characteristics from analog gear, because what you've got to remember is that DACs and amps all have analog circuitry. There's analog in there. So obviously, if the studio world can implement depth and width by using nonlinearities, then obviously the audiophile world can, and some do that. Some, DAC amps will give you a perceived feeling of depth and width, and the holographic thing I'm not entirely sure about. But, they can use distortion in certain ways that impacts the sim differently. In the same way that we can use analog gear and fucking certain plugins to change the sound of a record, right? There's tools at our disposal, and the audiophile world can be no different. However, as I was talking earlier about, a clean linear system, we need boring, flat, and linear. We need linear when we are mixing and mastering, not non-linear. What comes in needs to be what comes out. When we are feeding the digital signal to our DAC and it goes out to the analog domain, we need that digital signal to come out in the analog domain as linearly as possible without any audible distortion and without any frequency or phase changes. But the transient response has to remain completely intact. When we're using an amp, it's the exact same thing. We need the amp to take that analog signal and then amplify that linearly without any distortion, without any frequency or phase changes, and keeping the transient response completely intact. That's a linear system. What comes in is what comes out, just louder. And that's why many audiophiles hate the topping, because it's brutally honest. What comes in is what comes out. If there's sibilance in a mix that somebody left, I'm going to hear it. If the low end's not right, I'm going to hear it. If the mix hasn't been very well dynamically controlled at one point and the snare pops out, I'm going to hear it. If the limiting's been overdone, I'm going to hear it. Your job as a mix engineer is to create the depth and create the width and create the balance and create everything that an audiophile is going to then try and enhance with their fucking fancy non-linear DAC amp. And that is why you need a linear system when mixing, not non-linear. You don't want to change the sound of what you hear, because then what happens is that when you try and mix to that non-linear system, it will not translate to the outside world. You're going to sit and listen in a studio that's like using really clean converters, really good speakers, listen to, a mix on Amphions, and all of a sudden you'll be like, yeah, my mix doesn't sound as wide. Fuck, where'd that sibilance come from? Why's my low end some shit? Why? I didn't hear these things before. Shit. And then all of a sudden you look like a mug. Don't look like a mug. Just look like a good mix engineer. And in regards to being a good mixing and mastering engineer, that brings me to point number 3, which is that your main aim is translation, as I mentioned earlier. Audiophiles don't give a shit about translation because they aren't mixing. All they care about is listener preference. Now, there's a big difference between listening preference and translation. Your job is to get things to translate averagely to the outside world. Their job, it's not their job, they don't fucking work at it, but their aim is to try and get the music that they like to sound very specific to them and their ears. There's a massive, massive difference, right? And that's why, like, when you think about headphones, for example, right, many of them talk about the stock sound of the headphones, and a lot of them won't EQ headphones. Some do, but many don't believe in EQing headphones because you're losing the integrity and the original character and the original intention of the headphones, and they will completely bypass the fact that a lot of headphones have, bass roll-offs because they're driver limitations in dynamic headphones, which means that they can't properly actually, make sub-content, and then, if they do, it'll be massively distorted. But they all fucking love distortion anyway. So they're probably listening to, to a pair of bears and be like, yeah, man, I love the richness in this low end. When a guy like me is like, fuck, there's no definition in it. It's just a mushy fucking mess. Jesus. But that's why it's important not to blend the listener preference aspect of the audiophile world, which includes certain fucking hi-fi tunings that are all about, taking the mix and making it sound a very, 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 very set way, and just completely scrapping mix translation. Your job as an audio engineer is to get the client's intention to translate to the outside world to as many playback systems as possible. An audiophile's aim is to get it sounding best on their system. And it doesn't matter to them whether they use a specific DAC amp or they add distortion or, there's no sub-bass in a set pair of headphones. Like, if they don't like a set song on a set pair of headphones, they'll just move to another pair of headphones. There's some audiophiles that'll have fucking 10, 15 pair of headphones. They'll be like, I like this song on these headphones, and I like this song on these headphones, and I like this song to these headphones and that DAC amp, and it just gets fucking ridiculous, right? Listener preference isn't what you're looking for as an audio engineer. Translation is very important. And if we stay on that mixed translation point, that brings me to point number 4, which is that if you allow all this kind of audiophile, kind of listener preference mumbo jumbo to stick, you're going to stray from the original intention of the artist. And the artist is the most important. As I said earlier, audiophiles, essentially, they're the artist in their world. They're like, this is the way I want to hear this song, and this is what I'm going to do. But when you're in your mixing world, it's not up to you. Your taste means fucking nothing. You can't sit there and listen and go, in my studio it sounds amazing, and yeah, tough titties. If you want to hear how this mix should really sound, you need to come in my fucking studio. That's not going to work. You're never going to get clients again. That client wants to be able to listen on their cheap fucking setup or whatever they have, and the mix sounds amazing. Because what you've got to remember is your average consumer does not have the money to spend fucking thousands and thousands and fucking stupid money that audiophiles have. And that brings me to the last point, which is number 5. The reason that you should not bring the audiophile world into the audio world is because you'll end up spending a shit ton of money on things that really don't matter. You're an audio engineer, right? You have this up top. You know what makes a difference and what doesn't make a difference. You don't need to spend stupid money on cables. You don't need to spend stupid money on isolators. You don't need to spend this amount of fucking money that audiophiles get into for these marginal differences that most times 9 out of 10 is absolute placebo. The problem is with audiophiles is that not many of them do A/B tests because that's not what it's about. It's not about that much science to them. It's just about enjoying, and they actually live for the placebo. Honestly, an audiophile will tell you they like one thing one day and they don't like it the next. Where with an audio engineer, our translation tells us what works. Like if I'm mixing on the nanos, or I'm mixing on the Odysseys, or I'm mixing on the fucking organics or whatever, or I'm mixing on the MTM precisions, I know that my mixes are churning out and they're doing well. I don't need to second guess it. I don't wake up one day and just go, the hifi, the nanos just aren't really doing it for me today. Because the translation tells me everything that I need to know. I can just do an A/B with a mix and go, yeah, that's actually right, the mix is fine. Right, so just please, remember that as much as I own the topping stuff and I'm into the hifi, right, that whole audiophile thing is bullshit, right? Genuinely, in the studio world, hifi, beautiful, right? Tune them right, sound amazing, don't even need fucking crossfeed. The topping, clean, clinical, boring, but it tells you everything that you need to know. You will hear every bit of distortion in a mix. As I said earlier, remember, distortion on top of distortion. You'll find it very hard to hear distortion when you've already got distortion in the system. Many times because you say fucking distortion in a sentence, distortion on top of distortion, distortion on top of distortion. Right, either way, that's me done, right? Just didn't bring the audiophile world into the studio world, eh? And there you have it. My name is Paul Third, and I'll see you again next week.